Yeah, what you doing over there?
Oh, I'm deciding to be a little bit of a bad boy. See, I'm taking inspiration from Be Gay, Do Crimes. I'm folding the dog ears on the pages of this book.
Buddy, let me hold you up there. Let me show you how it's really done.
Thelma and Louise are going to catch hell.
I'll have a wild turkey straight up and a Coke back, please.
Thelma!
Oh, what? Tell me something. Is this my vacation or isn't it?
While the mere thought of going on a fishing trip is enough to make me want to jump off the edge of the Grand Canyon, these ladies actually commit to the bit. Everyone's favorite baseball player, Geena Davis, a noted Blue Beetle villain, Susan Sarandon, are electric as Thelma and Louise, two women who find themselves on a cross-country chase for the crime of self-defense. As they drive the backwoods and scenic byways of the American Southwest, they come to claim their own defiantly independent womanhood. Ridley Scott's masterpiece of a road movie asks the important questions. How come all motel pools are so nasty? Do abusive husbands know how to use microwave ovens? And why is it legal for Brad Pitt to ever put on a shirt? And so you put that intro together.
Yeah, we're doing something a little different this week, kind of taking a dive down memory lane, picking a film from the repertory, as it were, rather than doing a first-run new release movie.
Yeah, it's like kind of like shaking things up, and seeing how this goes, especially since we might not get a whole lot of new movies for a little while here in the next few months. But, and you actually picked this title, and this was my first time seeing this, personally. And I have to say, what a choice. God damn, this was amazing. This was amazing.
It's like the perfect summertime watch. It's like road movie, classic kind of American vistas and whatnot, and a really engaging story with some interesting characters.
Oh my god, yeah. It's like Ridley Scott, like I love like this guy because he'll make some stuff that's like I'll be like, what is he thinking there? But when he's firing on all cylinders, oh boy.
Yeah, guy knows how to make a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think what we'll do is just like we wanted to just kind of like go down. We'll kind of break down some parts of it, trying to pick it apart and see what makes this movie such a classic. What makes this movie work so well, have such this massive impact. So kind of starts with this opening where you have, as the title would suggest, you have Louise and Thelma. Louise is working in a diner, and Thelma is a stay-at-home wife for this guy named Darryl, who is possibly one of the worst human beings I've ever seen in a movie.
Darryl's like instant slime.
Oh my god, that's like right from like the first point there, I was like, oh, I hate this dude so much.
Yeah, fuck this man.
Yeah, it's like, and I think that's one of the things that is very effective in this. Because did Ridley Scott write this?
No, it was Callie Khouri, screenwriter, and she like deserves as much credit as him for the way this whole project kind of comes off.
Absolutely.
It's so economical in its storytelling and kind of how it parcels out information.
Yes, just like the way this is written, this is like if anybody listening to this is an aspiring screenwriter, please study this movie, study this screenplay, because the way that the characters are built is so effective. Like within, I was like the first 5 minutes of this movie even, I already had the very clear idea of who Thelma and Louise were.
No, I think it's really like you're saying, you get like kind of their basics of the relationship, which we'll kind of be delving into as this goes along, so that's really the heart and soul of the whole movie. But it's also kind of setting up something that it's going to spend the next 2 odd hours like turning on its head. You know, Thelma is, you know, a housewife who's very sort of doting on her man baby husband, and Louise is is a waitress at this very kind of like, you know, classic roadside diner situation. So it's this very sort of like top down, like white picket fence, like Americana conception of womanhood, you know, that is going to get completely kind of inverted in this whole crime spree that they go on.
Yeah, and I really like that there's this dynamic between them where Louise feels almost kind of like a mom friend, where it's like she's like, come on, Thelma, like that, I'm gonna take you out somewhere nice, away from your dirtbag husband. You know, whereas like, so it's like Thelma feels like a bit more, I kind of struggle to think of like the right word, I guess, almost kind of like innocence, like, you know, very early on, you know, like Louise is smoking and Thelma's like fake smoking.
Yeah, she's not like quite naive, but of the two, Louise is far more worldly, I would say.
It's a good word for it, like worldly, where it's like she's like, oh, she's kind of been around the block, like she's seen some shit, and Thelma is just like, you know, like, I don't know, like I said, like kind of come back to that, like almost feels like Louise is like, again, almost like a mom friend to her, where it's like it feels like she's kind of like she feels like she has to like take on more action to look out for Thelma.
Yeah, absolutely. She's kind of got her eye out for her and whatnot. And you can tell almost immediately how well they get along with each other, but they are very different personalities, you know. Louise is like Ziploc bagging all of her clothes, where Thelma's just like dumping it in like her entire wardrobe for this like weekend fishing trip. Just it's all going. You need it. Lanterns.
Yeah, just dump it all in. And just like these little things, like these little nuances that help to give you a better sense of who the characters are. And one of the things that I like is that it's because like you know, we kind of you know, we had to spend a little bit to kind of accurately define how they are, like who they are to each other, because it isn't just a very simple one note, like, oh, they are this, they are that. You know, there's right from the beginning, there's, you know, it's kind of like some nuances in there that you can start to pick out, and they just grow into that, like, you know, they start strong and they go into these incredible characters by the end.
Yeah, I think throughout it's just got this very sort of lived-in quality to it. You don't know their whole backstory, and you come to learn some more about them over the course of the film, but you just understand them on some sort of level, just about the little bits they're giving us here. And just the chemistry between Sarandon and Davis is so effortless.
Oh my god, yes. Yeah, so they go on their fishing trip, and the first stop is they stop at this kind of like this big bar, saloon place, dancing, and this is where the inciting incident of the story happens, where Thelma is kind of like lured outside by this guy who is like, you know, he's been trying to like act sweet on her inside, and they go outside and he tries to take advantage of her and tries to rape her. And Louise is there, and Louise has a gun that Thelma had brought in her bag. And long story short, Louise ends up shooting the man who's trying to rape Thelma, and the two of them then have to go on the run, and that's what the rest of the movie is about.
Yeah, and we don't have to dwell too much on this, but Susan Sarandon's performance in that, like, scene is so good. Like, just this, like, subconscious, like, fear she's got when she's, like, got the gun on Harlan, I think is the character's name. And just, like, I don't know, there's just this fright that, like, it just feels like, you know, you're in that situation that you didn't expect to be in, and all of a sudden you have power over him technically, but it's still this really scary beat.
Oh my god, yeah, like the whole, like the way that scene's like put together, everything that is making like my skin crawl and everything. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's just so gross and horrible and violating. But you need that to kind of propel this on the rest of the story. And
yeah, because what happens is like, so Louise like puts a gun to the guy's head. Thelma's able to get away. Like, they start walking away, and then the guy like still like hurls verbal abuse after them, and then Louise like
nope,
snaps and shoots him. And so that's like, they can't really say like, oh, it's self-defense, because technically they had gotten away. But just from like that, how horrible that scene is, it's like, you're so like, nah, Louise, give it to him, Louise.
Yeah, it kind of gives her the upper hand and more agency. It's
you're just
a definitive act that she is choosing to take.
Yeah, like she chooses this action, and from there it's and this again, this is what's so interesting about like the way this is all written, because it happens and you get this burst of energy after this dramatic inciting incident. So it's like, so they coast on that for a little bit. So it's like, well, what do we do? And then a little while later they say, okay, so our plan is Louise is going to flee to Mexico. To get there, we're going to stop in Oklahoma City to Western Union. And that gives, again, a roadmap for like the next part of the movie. And again, the story keeps moving forward at this very organic way. Because, you know, you can like analyze it, and you can kind of, you know, like we're doing right now, you can kind of, you know, pick it open to say, like, oh, here's how everything works inside. But it flows so naturally. This is like, again, incredible storytelling that's unfolding.
Yeah, it just has this engine that's just kind of always pushing things forward and keeping the momentum up.
And there's this point where, you know, they're coming up to Oklahoma City, and they pause at a truck stop there. And there's two things that happen at this truck stop. So one, we see like this old man sitting there at the station. He sees him come in, and like we don't see this old guy again, but it starts to form, like this is something that starts to forms a motif through other parts of the movie that I found was interesting. And we also meet Brad Pitt here, and he's like, hey, I'm heading your way, can you head my way? And it's interesting because in this one we kind of see that Thelma, you know, she even after what happened with the bar and all that, she's still kind of like, she kind of gets won over by him. Like, she's more wary at first, but then she's like, oh no, he's kind of cute, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, she's very willing to like let him in, it were.
Yeah, so it's like, so she still has that kind of, you know, it's like she's like shifted a bit as a character, but not too far yet. Yet. Yeah.
Not yet.
And we also, this is about the time when we find out that Louise has history in Texas, because she's like, okay, we have to get to Mexico, but you can't route us through the state. And she's very adamant, it's like, no, we're not going to go through there. It's not a good place for us to be. You know, and her rationality is, for what we did, if we're caught down there, Texas, like, state police will not be nice to us. But you're also like, oh, there's something else going on here. It's that mystery, that intrigue that invites us forward to continue watching.
Yeah, you're kind of seeing her as this more, you know, like I was saying, worldly figure, and it's starting to understand that she's got some sort of baggage, some variety that she's still dealing with.
And about this time, we also have the investigation is starting to kick in. So, like, you know, they find the body and everything. They start being like, oh, you know, these two women, you know, might have witnessed it. We just need to bring them in for questioning. And at first, it's just like, oh, it's just like, they say it's just questioning and all that. But as time goes on, it starts to be more like, okay, now we think they actually did it. And there, I don't know, there's this like this humorous moment here. It's kind of like a bit more subtle humor, because the local state police, like, he goes and he's like trying to find Luis's workplace, and he tries to be more low key, and he's like, is the manager in? And a lady just turns on. She's like, Marion, there's a police officer here. And everyone just turns and stares.
Like, what?
Like, trying to be discreet. And it's just like, nope, no cover for you, buddy.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting at this point where, like, we've got all the various kind of men in their lives kind of assembled at this point, just kind of the different ways that they interact with Thelma and Louise, either directly or indirectly, and just kind of this idea that to kind of have, like, take this agency over themselves is to inherently kind of be, like, transgress against this masculine paradigm. There's just so many faces of that. We have, like, the more overtly, nasty, awful examples of that in Darryl and Harlan, and then you have Brad Pitt, who, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And then, like this Al, I think, is the Harvey Keitel character, is predatory in the literal sense that he's a police officer pursuing them, but he does kind of start to develop a more sympathetic attitude towards them over time within the scope of his investigation. Just kind of, we'll get one other guy. It's just kind of this spectrum that's being set up to explore.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, like, there's a very that seeing these different representations, because, like you said, you have the more overt, nasty expressions of that, but how the officer from Arkansas, he often advocates, like, don't go after them guns blazing, like, this is don't think they're, like, actually dangerous. I think they've just been pushed into a corner, basically. And I think there's, like, some interesting stuff going on there. And we kind of circle back to that later on.
Yeah, as we kind of get closer.
We talk about Hal and Michael Eisner. And so when they get to Oklahoma City, there's actually a bit of a surprise because Luis's boyfriend is there, Jimmy, because she had called him and asked, like, hey, can you wire my money, like everything in my bank account, to me in Oklahoma City? And Jimmy surprises her by just showing up himself.
Right.
We get this very interesting like sequence that plays out in Oklahoma City. So Brad Pitt, JD, he ends up he tags along with them, and he ends up following Thelma. And so they have a little rendezvous in her room, and Louise and Jimmy, now they have their own discussion, and there's this very interesting contrast between the two, and this is where the contrast between the characters really stood out to me, and it started this really kind of like this heartbreaking difference between them, where over the course of this adventure, basically, Thelma's life is like it's beginning anew. Like, she had been dating Darryl since she was 14. They married when she was 18. Her whole life has been with this awful, terrible piece of shit. And for the first time, she's living. It's like her life is just beginning during all of this. But Louise, being, more mature, more worldly again, her attitude almost feels like she realizes her life is ending, like things are falling apart and it's never going to come back together.
Yeah, they're kind of diverging in a way.
She's because she talks to Jimmy, like, and Jimmy outright says, like, he was going to marry her. He gives her, like, a ring and everything, and the world's saddest marriage proposal. Just here's the box. Look there it is inside.
Very matter of fact.
Yeah.
But there is still like barbs to that relationship because he does have a violent outburst against her at one point during that conversation. It's
like
almost like the absentee boyfriend's the ideal boyfriend, but even then he's got some problems.
Exactly, and that's the thing, because like I'm not saying like oh this beautiful relationship is falling apart. Like no, this guy has his own issues. And it's clear that like Louise, I don't think she ever really intended to marry him. I think she might have been in this kind of limbo where it's like, I don't really like this guy, but I don't feel like breaking up with him right now. Just put it off till next week, put it off to next month, put it off till New Year.
Yeah, whereas like Thelma for the first time is making decisions. Like she is the strongest lobbyist to get JD in the car, and there's a sexual aspect to her. She's like panting like a dog and like really gunning for this. And she then later on when Louise shows them the door for the umpteenth time, she makes the choice to like let him in out of the rain or whatever, and they have their night together. So like she's beginning to kind of make these active decisions for herself rather than simply kind of clinging onto this thing that it hasn't been working forever, but it's what's been the status quo.
Yeah, and there's other aspects to that kind of solidify the different directions that they're going in. And I wouldn't even say that like they're growing apart. It's like they're growing in parallel. Like they're going in the same direction, but they have like different perspectives on it. And again, I'll elaborate more on that as we get near, as we continue on, because let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah, and there's actually this really interesting parallel in the starting scene. So Louise and Jimmy, like, they do kind of like a final split and everything. Jimmy is like, oh, I won't tell anybody about this. Where are you going? I'm gonna head out now. And there's this interesting parallel. So one of the diner staff comes over, kind of like makes a joke to Louise about like, oh, I thought that, things are going to get a little crazy over here. And it parallels in the opening of the movie when Louise is working in the diner, and she kind of makes a joke to these two girls like, oh, aren't you a little young to be smoking? It'll ruin your sex drive. And then immediately cuts to her smoking in the back.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of shows a little bit more like how her character. She's like, oh, you don't do that. And then she doesn't always practice what she preaches, but in a way that it's like, yeah, it's like a, hey, don't screw yourself up, kind of like how I have. Again, that protective tendency to be like, I don't want people to like, I don't want Thelma to, have this terrible experience that I had. And that also will come up again later. There's so much, because I feel like if we just lay all our cards on the table now, this discussion would be like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So she makes this joke to the two girls, and that's paralleled now at the midpoint of the movie when Louise is in the cafe and one of the staff makes a joke to her. And it gives a sense of, I don't know, this idea that this story and others just as dramatic as it could be happening like right around us, like right under our noses. Like those two girls at the beginning that Louise, has that talks to them very briefly. Maybe they have their own little thing going on. Maybe they're part of the Thelma and Louise expanded universe.
Yeah, it does kind of like have this universality to it, kind of broad world that it's in.
Yeah, and over the course of like through this middle chunk of the movie, there's I mentioned this before, this running motif of like these like old people like who are just sitting and they just watch, and the camera will focus on this. Like they come in, Thelma and Louise will come into a little town, And Louise especially will notice these people looking at them. You know, and again, it's just this interesting. I don't even really know how to describe it, the feeling that I got from it. I think it ties back to what you're saying before, because the movie starts with them and it's kind of like this idealistic, you know, American femininity, like being very passive. And they kind of, over the course of the movie, they become akin to these like legendary outlaws in a way. Like they become so like dramatic, larger than life. And it almost feels like the movie's inviting us to say, you know, look around and maybe these exciting things are happening all around us. Maybe people are doing these exciting things, are breaking these boundaries all around us, and we're not even noticing it.
It's an interesting way to kind of think about it.
Yeah. And next thing I'll talk about is that JD, Brad Pitt, betrays them. He betrays them.
Plot twist.
I know. And the thing is that and here's the thing, it actually genuinely like surprised me. And I feel like such an idiot because he outright says like, oh yeah, I was an infamous robber. And it's like, of course I should have realized he would take the money.
He's very slick, and even the whole kind of methinks the lady doth protest too much about him even getting in the car in the first place. You're like, you're a smooth operator.
Oh my god, I was just like, oh, this, and again, like, because that's like I didn't even think about like him being a payoff. I thought he was just like, you know, being all cocky for, you know, Thelma. Because I thought that the payoff for that was going to be like, oh, he would tag along with them, and then the police would find him. And then they'd be like, oh, you girls, we found you with him. This is why I should not have written the movie. Because that would have been much lamer than what actually happened.
Leave it to the pros.
Exactly. And then we also see the agents starting to gather at Darryl's place. And among them is, like I said, this guy, I swear he looks like Michael Eisner.
Like,
specifically like modern Michael Eisner, because like his hairline is kind of like a glacier. Maybe. It's kind of receded a bit.
Maybe they should let him do some theme park work.
I think not, because one Hollywood's limousine ride was bad enough. Thank you very much for asking. So the agents are all like, they're working with Darryl, and again, I love how much like the movie knows Darryl is a piece of shit and will grill him for that.
I wrote down somewhere, and I don't remember the context. I just, in my notes, I have a line that says, "Is Darryl Elon Musk?" And I'm sure there's some reason for that, but
because
Lord knows, if we could go to the timestamp, 47 minutes, 14 seconds, that will give the answer.
Oh my god. You know what? I'll do that.
God.
Right now. Let me go to my Amazon thing here. I think, so like the big thing that happened, because he goes like, because this is when he first got told that Thelma was involved in this shooting. And then the significant thing that happens is that he's standing in his pizza.
I'm sure there was something that made sense. Now that we've completely derailed everything.
Oh no. No, it's okay. It's okay. You know, this is what we do. We're gonna talk about this movie however we want to.
However we want.
Yes. I'll make us sound so smart in the cut.
It's like 3 seconds long.
And so as they go out from Oklahoma City again, so JD has taken their money, and you know, Louise is pretty upset with everything. Stop by like this little single intersection town, and again, like Louise has this moment. She sees a woman through a window, a little motif I mentioned, and she's about to put on some lipstick. She's just like, nah. She tosses it away. And then Thelma comes running. She's like, start the car, go, 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 go. And like, so Louise starts driving. Thelma jumps in. At first I thought it was like, oh, did she shoplifted some groceries? Oh my goodness. And then it's like, no.
No.
She took the gun and just robbed the store.
The CCTV footage of that is amazing, and she can learn. She's got all the greatest tricks in the book from JD.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because, again, like this, because the encounter, because JD kind of put on this little show of like, oh, here's how I rob things. And so she just kind of stole the little script he gave her, and then he used that. And then when they're watching the CCTV footage, it looks like, oh, she's been doing this her whole life.
Yeah.
And then everyone's just like, oh my god, this woman's crazy.
Yeah. And like, I think this is really the moment when there's this, like, later on, I think it's Thelma says like something's crossed over in her or whatever, but I think this really, like, you get her, well, robbing a store, and then Louise kind of tossing her lipstick. And I mean, like, you could probably make some kind of, you know, high school English thing about that, her being like rejecting traditional femininity or something, and like there's probably something to that, but like I felt like more it's like them going embodying this sort of like defiant sort of outlaw persona. And
yeah,
kind of, you don't ever really see them like indoors again, or like in these kind of confines and whatnot.
Yeah, that
them for themselves.
That's a good point. Like, because after that, like you said, we don't see them indoors anymore. It's always the open air, you know, the beautiful vistas that I grew up near. For those who don't know, I grew up in Arizona. Some Daniel Goldhorn lore for all of you out there.
Monument Valley looks so bomb in this movie.
God, it's so like you can tell this was on film. This was oh, it's so beautiful. And I said, like, when Ridley Scott has a hit, he hits hard. God damn.
Yep.
And later on, again, like, so we see like Louise, similar to like the lipstick at another stop. She takes stuff like her jewelry, things like that, and you know, like you said, like, you know, you can read like, oh, her like shedding her femininity, but there's also things that are like a watch and things like that aren't necessarily like, I would say, a feminine thing.
No.
Yeah.
Rejecting
and again,
time itself.
Oh my god. Go write an essay for Film 101 with that. And again, just it kind of feels
always
like
Wild Turkey o'clock now.
And I think that's because we see Louise kind of shedding these things, whereas Thelma's like so excited, and Louise will be excited too, but when we see her on her own, she's like more pensive.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of feels like it almost feels like she's starting to feel like almost guilty for like oh, like, you know, you see at a different point, she's like, oh, like, have I kind of screwed up Thelma's life too?
There's still this kind of sense of responsibility.
Yeah, you know, and while Thelma is, again, having the best time that she's ever had in her life, Louise, again, I feel like she's kind of starting to accept more and more, like, things probably aren't going to go very well.
Right.
You know?
There's only so many ways this can kind of end up, and, like, the longer this gets dragged out, the more things go south, like, in every sense, I guess. The options are narrowing.
Yeah, and it's just very powerful, because, again, like, so much of this goes unsaid. There's just just like the tension that's there, like, not just between like the cat and the mouse game, but just the way that they're developing, and just like the things that are unfolding, And like on the one hand, you know, it's beautiful, but at the same time, it's so tragic. And I was like, oh my god, too many feelings, too many feelings. And then Jimmy sells them out. Goddamn Jimmy.
Jimmy.
I thought he was one of the good ones, but no.
Hashtag not all men.
Ah. None of these men are Knopf. But then this also leads into one of the best scenes in the movie, where so Thelma calls home to Darryl, and like all the lines are tapped and everything, and the police have told him, like, and starts like, okay, don't let her know that you're in on this, you know, don't let her. And then on the other end, Louise is like, okay, Thelma, like, even if you think he knows, you know, you have to hang up the phone because that means we're being tapped and monitored. And so Thelma calls, and the first thing Darryl says is just, you know, Thelma, hello. She immediately hangs up. He knows.
Darryl's such a useless boob.
I know. And just, again, like, he's so awful, and the movie knows he's awful, and just, like, clowns on him for it. I'm just like, thank you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. The thing of beauty.
Oh my god. And yeah, like, as they keep going through the Southwest, they go through Monument Valley, like you said, and we get we end up getting this reveal, basically, where Thelma puts together that Louise had also been raped, like, in Texas, like that had happened to her before.
Right. It kind of really colors her worldview, understandably.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I had kind of like figured that that's what it was. It's like from her actions and everything. And real quickly, actually, I'm going to get on a little soapbox here and talk about good and bad screenwriting. Are you ready for this?
I yield the floor.
So, there is this weird, bizarre notion that if people can tell, like, I guess you say, like, a reveal or twist of a story before it happens, that means it's bad. And that's the most bullshit thing I've ever heard in my life. Because the way that it works in this movie is that, because, like I said, I kind of figured out, like, oh, that must have been what happened to Louise. And then when I find out in the movie, like, oh yes, I was right, that means I get the satisfaction of knowing I was right. I was like, oh, the story built to this logical conclusion. And I was like, I think that's what the secret mystery is. And then I was right. And I got a little endorphin from knowing I was right about the story. You know, so...
Right. The movie's treating her like a character, not like a J.J. Abrams mystery box element.
Exactly. So, if you're out there and you're right, you do writing, please don't completely change your story if your viewers or readers have figured out the twist. Because if they figured it out, that means you've done your job. And, like, obviously, don't want it to be too obvious, that's, because that's a whole other kind of thing there.
Right, but, I mean, this kind of keeps it in the background enough and just kind of, like, doles out little, like, nods in that direction every once in a while. It's a tightrope walk.
Yeah. And again, like, this movie does it so well. Like, it's the way the story unfolds, it's so powerful, because, like, as it goes on, not just what happens, but the way that you see it affect the characters, the way they grow closer together. It's chef's kiss.
Yeah, it's really rewarding to watch.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, actually. Do you want to do the next plot point here? Like,
sure. So they are on their way through Monument Valley. They're charting a course for Mexico. Everything seems, hunky-dory. They're on their way, and lo and behold, a cop decides to pull them over, and shit goes south real fast, and it culminates in them locking him into his own trunk. But at least they shoot some bullet holes for him to breathe.
There we go. They're not monsters. They just leave him in his trunk in the middle of the Arizona desert.
It's fine. It's a little, like, oven.
Oh my god. There's one little flourish I noticed here with the sound design that I thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because when, so they pull over, and the police officer pulls over as well, but before he turns off his engine, he does like a little route, like the and
It's gotta kind of twist the knife.
yeah, and it just adds this extra sense of like, I don't know, like he's getting ready to pounce. You know, it's like,
Yeah, there's a predatory aspect to it.
yeah, and it's just like again, it's those little details. I'm just like that make the emotions of this movie all come together. Because I know we've been talking so much about the screenplay, but the way it's brought to life, the way it's delivered, the way that the emotions are perfectly embellished, so it's not too over the top, but enough where it's just like you go along for this powerful ride. It all comes together, every aspect just beautifully aligns here.
Yeah, and it's again just kind of underlining that he is an authority figure. He's the masculine authority figure, but just an authority figure, period. And they're kind of at this point completely opposed to that, or like completely on this different sort of track.
Yeah, it's a very I actually have in my notes here, you can look at it right now. It's because he pulls Louise into his car. He's like, because it's kind of like there's a tension of, does he know that they're wanted, or is he just wanted for a speeding ticket? And so right when you're at the point where like, oh god, he knows, Thelma pulls the gun on him, and it's like, oh my god, what are you?
Oh boy, okay.
Oh my god, Thelma, what are you doing? Holy shit! Because at this point, like, really she's not
how to level head prevail.
Yeah, it's like, because at this point she doesn't have like a script that she's following or anything. She's just like, oh my god. And also this guy gets locked in his trunk. Like, I almost feel bad for him later on, because like
when he gets hotboxed by the biker.
Yeah, this biker just like comes
in. A hit of my blunt.
And he's like, come on, like let me out. And the guy just like takes a big inhale of his blunt and just exhales it into the trunk.
Puff,
it's like,
baby.
It's like, oh my god, wow. Oh.
Can I just say there's some really good like driving in this movie? Just as they're kind of going around, just like the scene, I think right after this, where it's like nighttime and they're like, there's just kind of a like crossfade from the two to kind of indicate that they're like taking turns behind the wheel, and just like out these wide roads and this, these sweeping views, and just like the music and everything, and it's just very satisfying.
Oh my god, yeah. So it's like, I love there's this really great like direction they'll do, because this movie could run the risk of becoming very boring to look at very quickly, because when so much of it is a car on a road. But the way that it's shot will be very interesting. One shot I really liked was one where the camera is, I'm gonna get these terms wrong, but I think it's like it's trucking alongside it, and it'll go from like the front bumper to the back as it's in motion. And I can just imagine kind of like the precision you need to move the camera precisely like that.
Yeah, so when everything's kind of in motion, what sort of like, if they have like a dolly rig for that or something, but
yeah, it's just
really...
like
and they got a hell of a car to shoot. That Thunderbird looks great.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a car person, but that's a cool car.
Yeah, it's like it's a cool car. Like, it's driven by two super cool ladies. It's the coolest car around. Get out of here with your Ecto 1 bullshit.
God.
Get out of here. yeah, it's like, so after like the kind of with the police officer, you kind of say like that's almost kind of like their final. It's they've become their final form, I guess you could say.
Yeah, at that point, it's all just pure kind of like we get to have fun at like we get him. Shortly thereafter, we get that like the truck driver that's been like plaguing their existence this whole time, who's like been making like lewd gestures at them and stuff. Like they just blow up his tanker.
Yeah,
it's just like
I was like, oh my god. And again, because like these, and they don't like actually hurt him or anything.
Yeah,
they're just
fine.
Like they scare the shit out of him, and then they
like castrate him essentially.
Yeah, they stick it to the oil companies too. Like they're just,
there we go.
Like this is what intersectionality is. Blowing up a guy's truck not only to get at him and his masculinity, but also to stick it to fossil fuels.
Shell. BP.
And I just love at this point because like, Darryl is like, again, he's just been this total piece of shit to Thelma. And then when he starts hearing like near the end of the movie, we see this zoom in on him as he's hearing all these reports of like they're extremely armed and dangerous. And he's just sitting there like, oh shit, oh fuck. And I'm not sure, like there's like two things that are going through his mind. Because like one thing I could think is like oh my god, did I cause this? But that would imply that he has self-reflection and guilt.
I don't think there's a damn thing going through Darryl's brain at any moment in this entire film.
The only other thing I can think of is he's probably thinking like, oh my god, like what if she snapped at me? Like I almost died.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. There's honestly, it's like you remember that thing in like in The Princess Bride when the grandpa's telling story to the kid and the kid's like, who kills Prince Humperdinker? And the grandpa's like, oh, he doesn't die, he lives. Kid's like, well, why are you telling me the story? That was me with Darryl. It's like who kills this son of a bitch?
Better to let him live and suffer in his eternal darkness. He won't have anyone to bring him microwave dinners anymore. It'll be terrible.
Oh no, he has to make that one microwave dinner last the rest of his life.
Forever.
He'll have that in his foot pizza.
Damn.
So and then we get this big climax of the movie. So, they had called and they accidentally go over the time that's needed to trace them. So all these police start to converge on them. And there's like some wild stuff going on. Like they shave like right between two cars and like the mirrors pop off. And it's just like Fast and Furious has like nothing on this shit.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun car chase. No looking back, baby.
And again, just these little embellishments. They're just so interesting because like by the end of this, it almost feels like a different movie at the end than at the beginning. Like I would not have thought at the beginning of the movie that there would be a massive tanker truck explosion.
Yeah, it definitely becomes more grandiose. You have like this tanker truck, or you have this like huge police pursuit with like helicopters and stuff. But like it does always like step back and like what's the button on like the showing the trucker who it's for is like their gleeful reaction to it, and at the end it more centers like it does slow down and take like they have a short conversation before they make their final choice, and so it is big and it's crazy and it's exciting and kinetically shot, but like it does always return to Thelma and Louise and like say, okay, what are they at as characters in this moment? What are they experiencing? What are their thoughts in the moment?
That's true. And I was like, and I guess like, yeah, so like I wouldn't say like it feels like a different movie, but it feels like it grows with them into something.
It's a movie that couldn't have happened to the characters at the start of it, for sure.
Yes, it's like because you have this big dramatic car chase, and then And then they get cornered at the edge of the Grand Canyon, and there's this beautiful moment, and this is when I start crying. It's like, and obviously like oh, everybody's like loading up all their guns and everything, and it's kind of it's the end of the line, and Thelma turns to Louise and says like just go for it. And Louise is like, what? She's like, just go, just keep going, like go over the edge. And for me, it just like it kind of hits this finally, because as I said, it feels like there's this tension, like and you kind of see this in the last conversation they have with the police, where Louise is like, oh, I don't care, like if you come back dead or alive, it's like I don't care if you take me dead or alive. And then Hal goes like, but what about Thelma? And you kind of see like this Louise's face kind of like gives a little bit, because she's like, oh, like she doesn't want to, she can't make that choice for Thelma,
right? But then Thelma does in the end.
Yes. And it's like, and it's beautiful because like it feels like this moment where Louise feels like that guilt has been kind of lifted away, where it's like she hasn't ruined Thelma's life. Like they are gonna go out in a blaze of glory as like legends, basically. Like
yeah. Like I think that last conversation they had, that last little exchange, and then their kind of friendship kiss is like crystallizes kind of everything that the movie has been leading up to. This just, let's keep going. This is the only way we can be free and attain like what we want on our own terms, and that's just kind of how the cards have fallen, so we're gonna do it rather than kind of cave and give in.
Yeah, it's they take charge, and they go out the way they want to, and it's oh my god. Yeah,
and the film does like mythologize them. It fades to white, you never see them land, so it's kind of this like hopeful, there's a hopefulness to it, not necessarily like quite optimism, but there's this sort of like, what if they did just keep going to it? I think we talked about how they become outlaws. This is very much like kind of in the same camp as like Bonnie and Clyde or Easy Rider, these kind of like new Hollywood movies and stuff, and those end in the deaths of these sort of counterculture figures. But those movies, like what Bonnie and Clyde ends with like their bullet riddled bodies, and Easy Rider is just like Dennis Hopper's like fucking motorcycle blows up and just nihilistic like fuck America. Like there's this angst and anger that's present in those films, which is not reflected here. This is a much more, I think, hopeful view in a way, because it kind of allows them the grace of just sort of fading away into white, rather than seeing these grisly, concrete endings like you see in these other films of this similar nature.
Yeah, and I really like the word you chose for that, actually, like the mythologize of it. It becomes mythologized because, again, the beginning of this movie, it's so down to earth, so mundane, and by the last act, like they're doing all this crazy stuff. Like it feels like a classic American tall tale in a way. Two women who go around that show up, dirty old men who leer at them, and then when all hope seemed lost, they drove away into the sky. Because that's my canon ending. The car. Yeah. The car.
Nothing happened. It can fly now. Yeah, it's fine.
They fly now. And also just like the music with that ending, like, oh my god, that was such a good way, like his kind of
it's very good.
Yeah. By the way, I noticed that the composer on this movie is your very favorite.
Look, I'll take 90s Hans Zimmer any day over remote control Nolan Snyder era Zimmer. Like, he had some bangers in this period. Like Lion King, this, sure, some other things I can't think off the top of my head.
You got, I mean, you don't like the Bwom.
I don't like him finding every bass trombone in the entire country and like mashing an organ on top of it, or like him going to, like, I mean, he starts to show his hand with, he also did Gladiator for Ridley Scott, and like it's basically just a dry run of his Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack, and then like a dry run of Dune. With the Lisa Gerard or whatever.
Yeah.
At least as good as anything he's put out. But here it is very like it's not used a whole lot, and B, it's this very like American sort of like the slide guitar and whatnot, and then kind of melded onto this sort of like soft 80s synth backbone that's, again, kind of like calling back to these older like outlaw things, but then kind of putting a newer spin on it. It's very satisfying.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Yeah, this is like, it's so, it's just, it's perfectly put, and that's what I like about this movie, is it never feels like it's, because as it goes on, you know, it has this great drama to it that's like feels heightened, but it never feels like it goes too far to become like melodramatic, to become like unbelievable, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, it kind of is very, it has its hand on the like keel the whole time, and it kind of is able to navigate the emotional beats and keep things exciting and heightened without being ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the ending so exciting, because they never jump the shark. They never go that.
They just jump a canyon.
I said that, and I was like, please don't make that joke, and then you did. I was like, oh god, why?
You brought up Zimmykin, so I'm gonna have to pay back and do.
But yeah, like it's a very, you know, like for, you know, because it's so grounded, because it's so emotionally invested through that, you know, the first parts of the movie. By the time we get to the end, and like, and all the crazy stuff is going down, like you buy it, you're in for the ride. You're like, oh my god. And then they drive off the canyon edge, and you're just like, oh my god.
You know,
it's like,
it's like E.T. but with people instead of aliens. Shitty cop chase.
It's I really loved seeing this for the first time, and just being able to kind of tease out all of these little tricks that make it so much better. I imagine that if I see this a second time, I'll be able to find even more. I'm excited to kind of dig in there. I don't know.
Yeah, this is one that I think is rewarding to revisit. I'll watch like maybe not quite once a year, but once every couple of summers. That's a nice thing to kind of spin up and queue up.
Yeah. So, yeah. Any other like things you want to like point out, like different aspects that you think are worth commenting on?
I think we've touched on a lot of the big important points for me. I think it's just a really satisfying story to watch these two characters that you kind of very quickly fall in love with, and you know, and we get to watch their trials and tribulations and how they kind of come out of this in their own way sort of stronger for it. And no movie does a better job of making an inspirational story about a woman who learns to smoke, so it's got that going for it.
Yeah, that was our, you know, us, you revisiting, me visiting for the first time, Thelma and Louise, this classic movie. So much to dig into here. And thank you so much for joining us for this episode today. We had a lot of fun. If you want to see us, if you want to hear us talk about more classic movies, let us know some titles perhaps, and we can see if we can fit them in over the course of the year. I'm Donor Goldhorn,
I'm Raynard.
and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Night.